So a few weeks ago, I put up that poll asking which Rivals character people thought would make the best president, and I honestly expected it to be one of those quick, lighthearted posts, but the amount of comments it pulled in and how seriously some of you took it actually got me thinking about it properly. So I started paying attention to things like how they might lead, how they would deal with conflict, whether they feel relatable, and if you trust them whatsoever, which, let's be honest, is already a tall order in real life, and once you look at the roster that way, the list gets pretty thin quick. Most of these characters might be great in their own lane, but actual leadership is something else entirely. Some are way too aggressive, some feel completely out of touch, and some make choices you'd never want from someone who's supposed to be responsible for other people, which is fine for some real-life governments, but not for my list. Anyway, there are a few characters who've actually dealt with real responsibility in the comics, situations where they had to lead an actual team, or sometimes even more. And since the poll clearly got everyone thinking, we might as well go through the ones who actually make sense to look at. So, we'll stick with those same criteria: leadership, conflict management, relatability, and trustworthiness, just to keep shit organized. Before we dive in though, leave your candidate in the comments down below just to keep things interesting, and if I don't mention them, tell me why I'm wrong and ruined your life by not adding them to my list. And if you want to take it a step further, you can talk to me on Discord. I'll leave the link for that down below. Alright, first up is Mr. Fantastic. So I'll admit, he's kind of a tough one, and not in a morally gray way or whatever people like to pretend he is. I swear, Namor's propaganda in the past 20 years has done significant damage to Reed's reputation. He does like to help. It's not like he's secretly evil, it's just that he gets so deep into whatever he's working on that it comes off like he's being an asshole. Just go look at what happens when he and Sue disagree on the whole Superhero Registration Act. He's on Iron Man's side, Sue isn't. He thinks the Registration Act is necessary because, logically, it solves a problem, but Sue sees it as something that restricts people's freedoms. And neither of them are wrong per se, but Reed goes straight into whether the logic is sound and doesn't even consider the emotional or human side of it. And that's why she leaves him, and this leads to them taking a break from the Fantastic Four in a completely different run to work on their marriage for the fucktillionth time. And they're replaced by, you'll never even guess it, Storm and T'Challa. Who would have thought? I'll come back to that later though. We're not done with those two. All of this just shows that Reed doesn't process conflict in a normal way. He always defaults to, well, facts don't care about your feelings, instead of listening to his peers or his wife or literally anyone trying to tell him about how something feels. And that's the whole issue. Not that he's a dick, but that he genuinely doesn't know how to lead people who don't operate at the same wavelength as him. Then you've got the trust thing. He has a lot of shady moments, but they're not selfish in nature. He's shady because he genuinely thinks he's protecting people. But I can't lie, it doesn't look great no matter how good his intentions were. Like, he literally builds a whole Thor clone without even telling his wife, and someone actually dies because of it. And that I know best mindset is a big part of why Sue walks out on him during Civil War. And then there's the Illuminati. If Marvel ever had an Epstein Island, I know exactly who I'd question first. But fortunately, Reed would never be a part of... Oh, wait, there he is. Well, among the shady stuff that they do, launching Hulk is like the cherry on top. The creme de la creme. They trick his ass, put him in a ship, and then send him into the void. They send his ass into space. They don't consult with anyone. They just decide, this is what we gotta do. Reed doesn't really think in terms of people. He thinks in terms of problems. If something looks like a problem, he tries to solve it. If someone disagrees, he thinks that's an obstacle, not so much a perspective. It's why he's smart, but it's also why he would fall apart if he were president. Because if this is Reed on a good day, imagine him when shit hits the fan. When that happens, he shuts people out entirely. The more urgent the problem, the quicker he is to go behind everyone's back and solve it alone, which is the exact opposite of how a president is supposed to operate. In a nutshell, Reed Richards fixes the world, he does not manage it. Next is Emma Frost. So Emma's pretty much a bad bitch, which means her leadership style is very different from Reed. She's not on some Captain America bullshit. She also doesn't really need to negotiate or convince people of something. After all, she kind of knows what they're thinking already. You see her girl bossing all over the comics, whether she's running the school, dealing with crises, when she's talking to Cyclops. She's not new to this shit. When it comes to pressure, she's probably second on this list in terms of all the shit she's had to overcome. A good example is in the new X-Men run. There's so much going on there, from Jean embracing the Phoenix and Cassandra Nova trying to kill all mutants. And at one point throughout all of this, Emma gets murked by a student at X Mansion. I'm not even kidding. And funny enough, the last thing she asks the shooter is including or not including human terrorism. Though here's something you'd never guess just from playing Rivals. Emma likes to avoid a physical confrontation, and whenever there's a situation that requires her to catch a fade, she's gonna look for another solution. And most of the time she does it by using her telepathy. The best example of this is during the Utopia storyline in Dark Reign. Osborn, yes, Norman Osborn, decides to take his Dark Avengers to attack the X-Men. And Sentry joins along, and his whole point is to overwhelm the X-Men. Now, if you know anything about the Sentry, you don't want to fight him head on. So while everybody else was trying to handle the rest of the Dark Avengers, Emma is the one who decides to take a different approach and goes straight into his mind. But she doesn't try to overpower him, she just tries to focus on reaching the human part of him, or Bob, by calming him down. He's a schizo, so it's probably a lot easier than fighting him head on. And basically, she gets him to stop fighting. So she'll do whatever she can to make sure that nobody gets hurt. That's one lane she's really good in. Anyways, you might also think that Emma is unrelatable because of how she conducts herself, though that front is mainly because of how she grew up, so showing any softness in her mind is weakness. But as you can tell, she does care. So maybe her public persona would cause people to not really relate to her, but considering that she's looking out for everyone's best interest, I don't really think it would be a major detriment. Now, trustworthiness is a bit complicated with Emma, not because she has some kind of history of going to Marvel's equivalent of a Diddy party. It's just that she's direct and her telepathy can help her get her way. She's done shit like that before, like poking around in Jean's mind, the psychic affair with Cyclops, pushing her students too far. But none of that really comes from wanting to hurt people. She's just that way by default. She doesn't like to pussyfoot around things. And over time, that's the part of her that actually settles in. She'll still play politics and keep certain things close to the chest. I wish I was close to her chest, but it's always in service of the people she's chosen. Emma will lie for you, not to you. That's her whole deal. But the honest question with her is this: she's a telepath, so would she ever nudge a vote if she really believed it would help people? Not in an evil way, but in the, I know what's best, let's not waste our time here, which she sometimes likes to do. That's one thing you'd always wonder about her in a democratic system. Actually, I'm curious, do you guys think Emma would push a bill through by helping Congress see it her way? Or would she just take the consensus as is, even if she thinks it's the wrong call? So yeah, Emma's telepathy is what makes her the most interesting pick here, because she could twist any situation if she wanted to, but she's not out here being malicious. We've seen enough of her to know she actually does care about people, even if she doesn't always show it. And when it comes to the stuff that actually matters in a leadership role, there's a lot working in her favor. Alright, let's talk about Black Panther now, because on paper, this man looks like the safest pick in the world. He was literally raised to lead. He's a king, so he can go aura for aura with pretty much anyone, and that's all I really ask from my politicians. Wakanda also runs better than most actual countries, so you look at him and go, yeah, why the fuck not? But then you actually think about it for more than 10 seconds, and you realize it isn't that obvious. And not because he's bad, it's just because he's built for a monarchy, not a democracy. He's used to a system where he decides, and that's how shit's gonna go. And the biggest example of this is the Sleeper Cell arc. This man comes back from space, sees Wakanda trying this whole democracy thing, and he's basically like,
we don't do that here.
He even admits it. Ceding authority is harder than I thought. Stable, should I do the accent? No, I don't think I should. Stable nations require singular leaders. And instead of, evolving with the times, he does the most T'Challa thing ever. He builds a secret global spy network behind everyone's back. Agents fake their deaths, plant themselves around the world, and they only report to him. And shocker, Wakanda goes to shit. One guy goes rogue, everything gets exposed, Wakanda feels betrayed, and the Avengers feel betrayed. And then T'Challa gets shadow realmed from his own country. And the only silver lining is that he was doing it for the right reasons, but even good intentions can be hidden behind secrets. You like that one? Chat, clip that. And it's a pattern with him. He learns, but only after he gets a reality check. Killmonger challenged him, and only after losing the throne, seeing Wakanda's flaws exposed, and getting dropped off a waterfall, Did he realize that the whole "we don't help anyone" philosophy was actually hurting people? Again, he only shifts after the universe folds his ass. And then there's the relatability thing. I mean, he's not the most approachable person. He's royalty, so you can kind of imagine that there's a disconnect from the average person. You won't see him out and about watching a Pistons game. Granted, nobody watches the Pistons, but you get my point. So when you put it all together, the secrecy, the stubbornness, the only change when I'm forced to mindset, the picture becomes pretty clear. T'Challa is a great leader. He's built to run a kingdom. But a presidency, a job where you have to explain everything, negotiate, and actually let other people in on the plan, that's not happening. Following Black Panther is Storm. So now we're hitting the big players here. Storm is basically written to lead, but not in the same way as T'Challa. It's really her personality that makes people want to follow her, and she doesn't even need her powers to convince them. For example, she beat Cyclops once without even using them. He was having some kind of existential crisis, and Storm was like, "Buddy, you gotta figure out what you're gonna do because you just aren't locked in right now." Long story short, they fought. Storm ran that fade. She didn't use any of her powers, by the way. She just kind of rage baited him, basically, and he realized that, damn, I'm kind of washed. I'm gonna head out. So she used his own pride and personal problems to beat him. Though she wasn't only the leader of the X-Men, she was also the Regent of Sol, which made her the spokesperson or representative for the entire solar system. Pretty important if you ask me. She was also married to T'Challa for a time where she was Queen of Wakanda, and it wasn't like a title for the sake of it. She was involved in politics as well, not to mention being part of the Avengers and Fantastic Four, like I mentioned earlier on. Personally, I think the Ironfire fight is the perfect example of how she handles conflict. She outsmarts him, shuts his ass down, and then when he's on the ground, she basically tells him, look, strength isn't about destroying everything in front of you, it's knowing when to stop. And that's when Arakko finally goes, all right, she cooked, she gets him, which means a lot because the Arakans are basically a culture built on prove it. They don't respect whether you're the leader of something else, they respect what you do in the moment. So she beats him in their way, but responds her way. And that's exactly why they end up respecting her. And honestly, that kind of sums up why Storm works so well as a leader in general. She doesn't just win fights, she wins people over by just being herself. She grew up with nothing. She knows what it's like to scrape by, so she naturally meets people where they are. You saw it when she was rolling with the Fantastic Four for a bit. Johnny and Ben loved having her there because she actually paid attention to the stuff Reed forgets and Sue gets overwhelmed by. And that's where the trust comes in too. She says what she means. If she changes her mind, she explains it. If she commits to something, she stands on it. She's consistent in a way that's honestly kind of rare in comics and even more so in actual people, let alone politics. So yeah, at this point, Storm just checks more boxes than literally anyone else we've talked about. She's led teams, countries, been a spokesperson for the galaxy, and she never even had to use telepathy to get something in her favor. Out of everyone on this roster, she's one of the few you could drop into an actual political system and run that shit. And last but definitely not least is probably the one most of you assumed I was gonna say for the end. Loki. Now, he might seem like a bad guy. No, I'm kidding, it's Cap. But there's a tricky bit to this because he would obviously make a good president, but not the greatest politician. And honestly, don't even take it from me, take it from him. Because in one issue, the whole country basically tries to hand him the presidency. Like they deadass lose their shit over it. And Steve is absolutely not about that life. I'm gonna do the Captain America accent right now. He says, a president can't just represent the people who cheer for him. You've got to represent the people who don't like you, who don't trust you, who don't vibe with you at all. And he knows that Captain America, the symbol, literally cannot be that person because everyone projects something different onto him. Some people see hope, others see propaganda, and then some just see him as a mascot. You can't really lead a democracy from that. Being president comes with shit like backroom deals that would diminish whatever ideal that got you to that point in the first place, and he knows that would undermine the whole point of Captain America. He's not meant to be dealing with bureaucracy. He even says straight up, if he became president, he'd lose the ability to stand for the dream that he's been fighting for since the 40s, to represent hope. And once he says that, it makes perfect sense. Of course he's not taking the job. It's not even a maybe for him. So yeah, Cap turns it down because he actually knows himself. He knows what he's good at, what he represents, and that being president would kind of go against all that. It's not that he wouldn't do the job well, he probably would. It's just that the parts of the job that really matter aren't the parts that he sees himself doing. He's not built for the political shit, and he knows it, and that's what separates him from everybody else. Reed would do it, but probably get impeached because he's never talking to anyone. Granted, he would solve every issue in the country within a week, but it would never get passed because who's going to benefit from that? T'Challa, on the other hand, is already in that world, so he would consider what political leverage it would give him. Emma would kind of be in the same lane as T'Challa, but for totally different reasons. She's not sneaky in the same paranoid way he can be, but she absolutely likes things to move fast. If she thinks something is genuinely good for people and Congress is taking the piss, I can easily see her using her telepathy to move things along. As for Steve, well, that's pretty much settled. Now, I should also clarify why I didn't go into too much depth on Black Panther or Captain America in the same way that I did for some other characters, and it's simply because they're the obvious choices. You already know that they're good leaders, and you're aware that they would make a good president in a certain criteria. However, would their personalities and their histories really translate well into a democratic system? That's a different thing. Black Panther, clearly not. Cap, he doesn't even want to be president because the political side of things, and he's just not built for that area of expertise. So I wanted to put a bit more pushback on the common knowledge or common expectations, just so it's a little more interesting and you guys think about it in a different way. So yeah, that's why I ultimately think that it's either between Storm or Emma, and honestly, it's Storm. She fits this in a way the others don't, and she'd actually enjoy the political side in a way that Cap never would, for example. And, you know, the thing about Emma to me is that I believe she would make a good president, but it's always the telepathy thing, right? You never know when she influenced the decision. It's always going to leave a gray area. So I think Storm, considering all the things she's done, and you know, it's a safe choice and makes the most sense to me at least. So that's the video. I know I covered a lot, so if any of that made you think, holy fuck, you're reaching, buddy, well, let me know. Maybe I hyped someone up too much. Maybe I didn't give someone else enough credit. That's kind of the fun of this whole thing. Now, if you fuck with videos like this, go ahead and like and subscribe so I know to keep making more. I genuinely had a good time putting this together. I ended up rereading way more comics than I planned to, just to make sure that everything made sense. So hopefully it gave you something cool to look into on your own. And hey, if you want to talk more outside of YouTube, the Discord's always there. I'm usually around and always down to talk about nerdy shit. Thanks for watching, as always, and until next time, make sure to take care.